Close your eyes now and let your breathing slow. Tonight we journey not across distant lands, but inward to a place of stillness that has been waiting for you all along. 2,000 years ago, in the bustling streets of ancient Rome and the quiet gardens of Athens, philosophers discovered something remarkable. They found a path to peace, not by changing the world around them, but by changing how they understood it. This wisdom is called Stoicism. It is not a cold philosophy of suppression, nor a retreat from life. It is something gentler, a way of finding calm in the midst of chaos, of accepting what we cannot change, and focusing on what truly matters. Tonight, as you rest, let these ancient teachings wash over you. Let the voices of emperors and slaves, of advisors and teachers speak to you across the centuries. Their words still carry the power to quiet a restless mind. You need not memorize anything. You need not take notes or make plans. Simply listen and let the wisdom find its own place within you. The Stoics believed that peace was not something to be found, but something to be uncovered. It already exists within you, beneath the worries and the plans, beneath the regrets and the fears. Tonight, we uncover it together. Imagine for a moment the Mediterranean world of 2,000 years ago. The sun sets over Athens, casting long shadows across the marble columns of the Agora, the great marketplace where democracy was born. The air is warm, carrying the scent of olive wood fires and bread baking in stone ovens. Somewhere nearby, a fountain splashes gently, its waters trickling into a shallow pool. Citizens in flowing robes walk slowly home, their sandals soft against the worn paving stones. The day's business is ending, the bustle of the market fading into peaceful evening. And there, beneath a long colonnade decorated with painted murals, a small group gathers around a teacher. They lean against cool marble pillars or sit on simple wooden benches as the teacher walks slowly among them, speaking of virtue and reason and the path to a tranquil mind. This colonnade is called the Stoa Poikile, the Painted Porch, and these students, listening as dusk settles over the ancient city, they are the first Stoics. But our story begins elsewhere. Our story begins with a disaster. Around the year 300 BCE, a merchant ship sailed the waters between Cyprus and Athens. Its cargo was precious, purple dye extracted from thousands of murex sea snails, worth its weight in silver. The merchant aboard this ship was a man named Zeno. Born in the city of Citium on the island of Cyprus, he had spent his life in trade, following the routes his father had traveled before him. He knew the weight of those clay amphorae filled with precious dye. He knew the calculations of profit and loss, the negotiation of prices in foreign ports, the anxious watching of the sky for signs of storms. But the sea is indifferent to human plans. A storm arose. The waves grew mountains tall. The wind howled across the deck like something alive, and the ship, with all its cargo, all of Zeno's wealth, sank beneath the dark waters. Zeno survived. He washed up on the shores near Athens, gasping for breath, seawater still in his lungs. Everything he had worked for, gone, dissolved into the wine-dark sea. Most people would call this a tragedy, and for a time perhaps Zeno did too. He wandered the unfamiliar streets of Athens, a stranger in a strange city, with nothing but the clothes on his back, no purpose, no direction, his entire life swept away. But what happens next changed the course of human thought. In Athens, still dazed from his loss, Zeno wandered into a bookshop. Perhaps he sought distraction, perhaps mere shelter from the unfamiliar streets, or perhaps something deeper guided him there, some thread of fate that we cannot see. The bookshop was small, scrolls piled on wooden shelves, the smell of papyrus and old leather, a place where wisdom gathered dust until someone came looking. Zeno picked up a book at random and began to read. It was a collection of stories about a philosopher named Socrates, a man who had lived a century before, who walked these very streets of Athens, asking questions that no one could answer, seeking truth in conversation rather than commerce. Something in those words spoke to Zeno. Here was a man who possessed nothing of material value, who wore the same simple cloak in summer and winter, yet who seemed richer in spirit than any merchant Zeno had ever known. Socrates had been put to death by the Athenians for corrupting the youth, yet he faced his execution with perfect calm, drinking the hemlock poison as if it were wine at a feast, speaking of philosophy until his last breath. What kind of man could face death so peacefully? Zeno looked up from the scroll, his eyes wide with a new kind of hunger. He asked the bookseller, "Where might I find a man like this today? Where are the philosophers?" By pure chance, or perhaps by fate, a strange figure was passing by the shop at that very moment. A man in a rough cloak, walking with the confident stride of someone who cared nothing of the opinions of others. The bookseller pointed, "Follow that man. His name is Crates. He is a philosopher." And Zeno followed. Crates of Thebes was a Cynic philosopher. The word cynic meant dog-like, and these philosophers embraced the name. They lived simply, sleeping in the streets, begging for food, rejecting all the comforts and conventions of civilized life. They believed that happiness came not from wealth or status or pleasure, but from virtue alone, from living according to nature, from freeing oneself from the chains of desire. Crates had once been wealthy. He gave away his entire fortune to become a beggar philosopher, scandalizing his family, mystifying his friends, but finding a peace that no amount of money had ever brought him. Under Crates, Zeno began to see his shipwreck differently. He had lost his cargo, yes, but had he lost anything that truly mattered? His ability to think remained. His capacity for friendship remained. His character remained. The storm had taken his external wealth, but it could not touch his inner resources. This insight became the seed of everything that followed. For 20 years Zeno studied, not just with Crates, but with teachers from many schools of philosophy. He absorbed the logic of the Megarians, the natural philosophy of the Academy, the ethics of various traditions. He was like a bee moving from flower to flower, gathering nectar from each and slowly transforming it into honey all his own. And what he created was something new, a philosophy that was practical rather than abstract, a way of life rather than a mere system of thought, a path that anyone could walk, rich or poor, free or enslaved, emperor or beggar. Around 300 BCE, Zeno began to teach, but he did not establish a formal school in a private building. Instead, he gathered his students in a public space, a long colonnade called the Stoa Poikile, the Painted Porch. The colonnade was decorated with famous paintings depicting scenes from Athenian history, battles and heroes, the glory of the city. But Zeno and his students faced inward, away from the paintings, focused on something far more important than ancient victories. They discussed virtue and reason and the nature of the good life. Those who gathered there came to be known as the Stoics, the people of the porch. Reflecting on his journey years later, Zeno famously said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I was shipwrecked." The worst day of his life had become the first day of his true life. The loss that seemed to destroy him had set him free. And this became the first great teaching of Stoicism, that what we call disaster may be opportunity, that what we call loss may be liberation, that the things we cling to most desperately may be the very things that prevent us from finding peace. Let that sink in for a moment as you rest. The thing you are worried about, the problem that keeps you awake, perhaps it too contains a hidden gift. Perhaps within every storm there is a shipwreck waiting to set us free. Let us visit the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch where Stoicism was born. Close your eyes more deeply now, and let the image form. You stand in the Athenian agora, the great marketplace at the heart of the city. It is morning, and the sun has just risen over the hills to the east, painting the marble columns in shades of gold and rose. The agora is a sprawling open space, surrounded by temples and civic buildings, colonnaded walkways and merchant stalls. The Parthenon rises on the Acropolis above, gleaming white against the blue Mediterranean sky. People are beginning to fill the square, merchants arranging their wares, philosophers debating in small groups, citizens stopping to chat at the public fountain. And there, along the northern edge of the agora, stands the Stoa Poikile. It is a long colonnade, perhaps 100 paces from end to end. A row of marble columns supports a sloping roof. One side the colonnade opens to the agora. On the other, a solid wall displays 4 magnificent painted panels. The paintings show famous battles, the fall of Troy, the clash between Athenians and Amazons, the triumph at Marathon, where Greek civilization was saved from Persian conquest. The colors are vivid, reds and blues and ochres, gold leaf catching the morning light. The heroes and warriors seem almost alive, frozen in their eternal struggles. But this morning, a small crowd has gathered beneath these paintings, and they have turned their backs to the images of war. They are listening to a man who speaks of peace. Zeno walks slowly as he teaches, pacing up and down the colonnade. His students follow with their eyes, or lean against the cool marble pillars, or sit on simple wooden benches. He is not an imposing figure. He is small, with dark eyes that have seen loss, and a voice that is calm rather than thundering. But when he speaks of virtue, when he speaks of the tranquil mind, something shifts in the air. Some things are within our control, he tells them, and some things are not. Within our control are our opinions, our desires, our aversions, in short, everything that is our own doing. Outside our control is everything else, our bodies, our possessions, our reputations, the opinions of others, in short, everything that is not our own doing. This distinction, so simple to state, so difficult to truly understand. This becomes the foundation of everything. Think about what Zeno is saying. So much of our suffering comes from wanting things to be different than they are. We want the weather to be fair, but it rains. We want others to treat us kindly, but they are thoughtless. We want our plans to succeed, but obstacles arise, and we rage against these things. We worry and scheme and hope and fear. We lie awake at night rehearsing arguments, or imagining disasters, or wishing we had done things differently. But here is the question Zeno asks. Can you actually control these things? Can you control the weather? Can you control what another person thinks? Can you control whether your ship will reach port safely? No, these things are not in your power. They never were. What is in your power is how you respond. You can choose to accept the rain or rage against it. You can choose to remain calm when insulted or let anger poison your heart. You can choose to do your best and then let go of the outcome. This is freedom, not the freedom to control the world, but the freedom to control yourself. As you rest tonight, consider this teaching. All the things you cannot control, the problems at work, the words of others, the uncertainty of tomorrow, let them go, just for now. You cannot solve them tonight. You cannot change them by worrying. All you can do is let them drift past like clouds moving across a night sky. What remains when you let go of what you cannot control is what you can control. Your breath rising and falling, your thoughts growing quieter, your choice to rest. This is what the Stoics meant by peace. Among Zeno's students, there was a man who showed that philosophy was not only for the wealthy. His name was Cleanthes. Before he came to Athens, Cleanthes had been a boxer, a working man with powerful arms and calloused hands. He knew nothing of philosophy, nothing of logic or metaphysics or ethics. He arrived in Athens as a young man with only 4 drachmas in his pockets, barely enough to survive a week. He was penniless, friendless, a stranger in a city that had no use for uneducated laborers. But he had heard of Zeno, and he desperately wanted to learn. There was a problem. Philosophy does not pay. Zeno taught freely at the Painted Porch, but Cleanthes still needed food, still needed shelter. He could not simply stop working and become a student. So Cleanthes devised a solution. He would work through the night, drawing water from the public wells and carrying it to gardens throughout the city. Heavy wooden buckets on his shoulders, miles walked in the darkness while respectable Athens slept. Then, when dawn broke, he would wash his face and walk to the Stoa Poikile to hear Zeno teach. His nickname became the Well-Water Collector. Picture this man, if you will. It is the middle of the night in ancient Athens. The streets are dark, lit only by starlight and the occasional oil lamp flickering in a window. A lone figure walks through the sleeping city, his shoulders bent under the weight of 2 heavy buckets. Water sloshes gently with each step. He is tired. His muscles ache from hours of labor. His back protests every movement. But his mind is alive. As he walks, he turns over the philosophical questions he heard that morning. He contemplates virtue and reason and the nature of the good life. The work is his body's, the thinking is his soul's. And when the first light appears on the eastern horizon, he sets down his buckets and goes to learn. Cleanthes' situation was so unusual that he fell under suspicion. The authorities hauled him before a court, demanding to know how a man could spend his entire day at philosophy lectures. Where was his money coming from? Was he a thief, a counterfeiter? Cleanthes proved his hard work and industry. He called witnesses, the gardeners who paid him, the well-keepers who saw him night after night. The court was so impressed by his dedication that they offered him a reward of money, but Zeno made him refuse it. A Stoic does not accept charity when he can work. A Stoic earns his way, even if the earning is hard. For decades, Cleanthes carried water by night and wisdom by day. When Zeno died, this former boxer, this water-carrier, became the second head of the Stoic school. He led the school for 32 years, writing the famous hymn to Zeus, developing Stoic physics and cosmology, training the next generation of philosophers. He lived to be 99 years old, and when he died, 600 years later, a statue of Cleanthes still stood in his hometown of Assos, honoring the man who refused to let poverty stand between him and philosophy. What can we learn from Cleanthes? That the path to wisdom is open to everyone, rich or poor, educated or unschooled. The only requirement is the willingness to walk. That honest labor is noble. There is no shame in carrying water, in working with your hands, in doing what must be done. That dedication matters more than talent. Cleanthes was considered slow-witted by some. He did not have the brilliant mind of his successor Chrysippus. But he persevered, night after night, year after year, and he changed the world. And perhaps most importantly, that the quiet hours of the night can be a gift. When the world sleeps and you are awake, there is time for thinking, time for wondering, time for the mind to wander through questions that have no easy answers. Like Cleanthes walking through dark streets with his buckets, you too can find philosophy in the stillness. So rest now, and let your mind wander where it will. Before we travel further, let us rest with the teachings themselves. What did these Stoics believe? What wisdom did they pass down across 2,000 years? At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a simple observation. We suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about those events. Consider, a rainstorm is just a rainstorm, droplets of water falling from clouds, neither good nor bad in itself. But if you had planned a picnic, you might call the rain terrible, a disaster, your whole day ruined. While a farmer whose crops are dying from drought looks at the same rain and calls it a blessing, a miracle, the answer to prayers. Same rain, different judgments, different experiences. The Stoics noticed this pattern everywhere. An insult is just words, vibrations in the air, but we can choose to feel wounded, to carry the hurt for days, to lie awake replaying the conversation. Or we can let the words pass us through, like wind through an open window. A delay is just time passing, but we can rage against the traffic, pound the steering wheel, raise our blood pressure. Or we can accept that we are not in control of the road and use the time to think or breathe or simply be. This does not mean that nothing matters. Far from it. The Stoics believed that some things matter very much. Virtue matters. Being a good person matters. Acting with wisdom and courage and justice and self-control. These things are within our power, and they are the only true goods. But external things, money and reputation and health and even life itself, these are what the Stoics called indifferent, not because they do not affect us, but because they are not the source of true happiness or true misery. A good person can be poor and still be good. A virtuous person can be sick and still be virtuous. A wise person can lose everything and still have everything that matters. There is a phrase the Stoics used, amor fati, love of fate. It means accepting not just what happens to you, but embracing it, saying yes to your life as it is, not as you wish it were. This is not passive resignation. It is not giving up. It is the recognition that fighting against reality is exhausting and futile. Like swimming against a powerful current, you wear yourself out, but you go nowhere. Better to work with the current. To find what you can do within your circumstances, rather than raging against circumstances you cannot change. The Stoics also believed in something they called the logos. This word is difficult to translate. It means reason, or rational principle, or perhaps divine intelligence. The Stoics saw the universe as fundamentally rational, not chaotic. They believed that everything that happens according to a deep order, even when we cannot see it. This does not mean that bad things are secretly good, or that suffering is an illusion. It means that we are part of something larger than ourselves, that our individual stories are woven into a cosmic tapestry, and that acceptance of our place in this tapestry brings peace. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his private journal, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart." And elsewhere, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And perhaps most beautifully, men seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores, mountains. And you too are especially inclined to desire such things. But this is altogether unphilosophical. It is in your power, whenever you choose, to retire into yourself. For nowhere does a man retire with more quiet or more freedom of trouble than into his own soul. Think about those words as you rest. You do not need to travel to find peace. You do not need to change your circumstances or fix your life. The retreat is already within you. Right now, in this moment, you can retire into yourself. You can find that quiet place where external events cannot reach you, where the noise of the world fades, where you are simply yourself. This is what the Stoics practiced every day. This is what they offer you tonight. The door to that inner retreat is always open. All you have to do is walk through. Let us rest a while longer with the teachings. The Stoics were not merely philosophers in the abstract sense. They were practical guides to living. Their wisdom was meant to be used, not just admired. It was medicine for the soul, not decoration for the shelf. Consider the Stoic teaching on worry. Seneca wrote something that speaks directly to anyone who has ever lain awake at night, turning problems over their mind. There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a moment. How many of the things you have worried about actually came to pass? How many of the disasters you imagined ever happened? The Stoics noticed that the mind is a storyteller. It invents catastrophes. It rehearses failures. It conjures enemies that do not exist. And all of this happens in imagination, not in reality. The worry itself becomes the suffering. The anxiety becomes the problem. We hurt ourselves with thoughts about things that may never happen. The Stoics developed a practice to address this. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds strange, even counterproductive. Why would you deliberately think about bad things? But there is wisdom in it. The idea is to consider calmly in advance what might go wrong, to imagine the worst-case scenario, not with panic, but with acceptance. What if I lose my job? What would I do? How would I cope? What if this relationship ends? What resources would I still have? What friends? What inner strength? What if I become ill? How would I face it? What would remain of my dignity, my character, myself? The purpose is not to wallow in negativity. The purpose is to discover that you could survive, that even the worst outcomes would not destroy what matters most about you. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than in reality." By imagining the worst in advance, calmly, we defang it. We realize that we have resources we did not know we had. We see that we are stronger than we feared, and then the worry loses its power. Another Stoic practice was called the view from above. Marcus Aurelius used it often, and it appears throughout his meditations. The practice is simple. You imagine yourself rising above your current situation, higher and higher, until you can see the whole city, then the whole country, then the whole earth floating in the vastness of space. From that height, your problems look different. The argument that consumed you, the slight that wounded you, the fear that kept you awake, they shrink to their true proportions. You see that you are a small part of something vast, that your concerns, however real, are just one thread in an infinite tapestry. This is not meant to make you feel insignificant. It is meant to put things in perspective, to quiet the voice that says this is the most important thing in the world, to remind you that the universe continues whether you worry or not. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Think often on the swiftness with which the things that exist and the things that are coming into existence are swept past us and carried out of sight. For all things are like a river, in perpetual flux, their causes in constant change, nothing standing still, while on either side of the present stretches the infinity of past and future, in which all things vanish. Is it not folly, then, to be puffed up with such things, or distressed by them, or to complain of them, as if they were going to trouble us for long? These words were written nearly 2,000 years ago by a man facing war and plague and the death of his children. Yet they speak to us still. Because the human condition has not changed, we still worry, we still fear, we still lie awake turning problems over in our minds, and the medicine the Stoics offered still works. Let your problems shrink to their true size. Let the vast perspective of time and space put them in their place. Let the worry dissolve into the recognition that you will meet what comes when it comes, with whatever you have. For now, there is only rest. For 2 centuries, Stoicism flourished in Athens. Students came from across the Greek world to study at the Painted Porch. Philosophers debated and wrote and taught. The school passed from Zeno to Cleanthes, and from Cleanthes to Chrysippus, and onward through generation after generation. But the world was changing. A new power was rising in the West. A city of soldiers and statesmen, of engineers and lawmakers. A city that would one day rule an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Persia. Rome. In 155 BCE, something remarkable happened. The heads of 3 great philosophical schools traveled from Athens to Rome. They came as ambassadors, sent to negotiate a fine that Athens owed. But while they were there, they gave public lectures, introducing Roman audiences to Greek philosophy for the first time. The lectures caused a sensation. Young Romans who had been raised on stories of military glory and ancestral virtue suddenly heard a different kind of wisdom. Philosophy was not just for Greeks, it could speak to Romans too. Over the following decades, Stoicism found a new home in the Roman world. The Romans took to Stoicism naturally. Here was a philosophy that valued duty and self-discipline and service to something greater than oneself. These were Roman virtues dressed in Greek philosophical clothes. The Stoic emphasis on accepting fate resonated with Roman soldiers who faced death on distant battlefields. The Stoic focus on what we can control appealed to Roman administrators who governed provinces they could barely understand. The Stoic call to virtue spoke to Roman aristocrats who struggled to maintain honor in a world of political intrigue. And so, Stoicism became the philosophy of Rome. Let us move forward now 2 centuries to the 1st century of the Common Era. Rome is no longer a republic, it is an empire, ruled by emperors who hold the power of life and death over millions. The empire stretches across the known world. Roman roads connect distant provinces. Roman aqueducts bring water to sprawling cities. Roman legions guard the frontiers against barbarian tribes. But beneath the glory, there is also corruption, there is cruelty, there is the constant threat of political violence. The emperors Tiberius and Caligula and Nero sit upon the throne. Some are competent, some are monsters. All unpredictable. And in this dangerous world, 3 great Stoics emerge. A wealthy advisor who falls from grace and is exiled. A slave who becomes one of the most respected teachers in the empire. An emperor who never wanted power but bore its weight with grace. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. These are the 3 great teachers of Roman Stoicism, and their words have come down to us across 2 millennia, still fresh, still relevant, still able to quiet a restless mind. Let us meet them, one by one. As you rest, let their stories unfold. They lived lives very different from yours, in a world of togas and gladiators, of gods and emperors, of slaves and senators. But they faced the same challenges you face. They worried about the future. They struggled with difficult people. They lay awake at night wondering if they were living the right way. And they found peace, not by changing their circumstances, but by changing themselves. Their wisdom is waiting for you. Let us pause our journey through ideas and rest in a place. Let us visit Rome, the eternal city, as it was when the Stoics walked its streets. Close your eyes more deeply and let the image form. It is evening in Rome. The sun is setting behind the 7 hills, casting long golden shadows across the marble temples of the Forum. The heat of the day is fading. A gentle breeze comes from the Tiber, carrying the smell of water and the distant sound of voices on the river. The streets that were crowded all day are beginning to empty. Merchants close their stalls, folding bright awnings, stacking clay amphorae, counting the day's coins. Slaves carry amphorae of wine and baskets of bread to the homes of their masters. Senators in white togas walk slowly toward their villas, attended by servants carrying their writing tablets and scrolls. The city is beautiful in this light. The marble columns of the temples glow pink and gold. The fountains splash in their basins, catching the last rays of the sun. Somewhere, a woman is singing as she prepares dinner. The melody drifts through an open window, mixing with the cooing of doves on the rooftops. The smell of cooking fills the air. Olive oil heating in clay pans, bread fresh from the oven, roasted meat and herbs, garum, the pungent fish sauce the Romans loved. In a wealthy home on the Palatine Hill, a man sits in his study. The room is small but elegant. The walls are painted with scenes of gardens and birds, impossible perspectives that make the room seem larger than it is. An oil lamp flickers on the desk, casting dancing shadows. The man is writing. His stylus moves across a wax tablet, scratching letters in the soft surface. He pauses, looks out the window at the fading light, then returns to his work. He is composing a letter to a friend about philosophy, about how to live well, about finding peace in a turbulent world. This is Seneca, or perhaps Epictetus, or any of the countless Romans who found in Stoicism a guide through the chaos of their times. The evening continues. Families gather for the cena, the main meal of the day. They recline on couches arranged around low tables, eating with their fingers, drinking wine mixed with water. The day's business is done. The worries can wait until morning. Children play in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Servants move quietly, refilling cups, bringing new dishes. The sky outside turns from gold to pink to deep purple, and slowly the household prepares for sleep. The Roman philosopher had a particular relationship with night. The day was for business, for politics, for the busy work of living in the world. But the night was for reflection, for reading, for the quiet work of the soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations at night, after the day's duties were done. Seneca examined his conscience each evening, reviewing his actions before sleep. Epictetus taught his students that the hours before sleep were precious, a time to gather the lessons of the day, to prepare the mind for rest. The night was also a time of vulnerability. Without electric light, the darkness was total. The stars wheeled overhead, visible as they never are in our illuminated age. The Romans felt the vastness of the cosmos more directly than we do. They saw the Milky Way stretching across the sky. They watched the planets move through their ancient paths, and they felt small, but not in a bad way. Small in the sense of being part of something immeasurably larger, connected to the stars, to the gods, to the rational order that the Stoics called the Logos. As you rest tonight, imagine yourself in that Roman evening. The day's work is done, the meal is finished, the household is settling into quiet. You recline in your study, or perhaps in a garden courtyard, surrounded by columns and the scent of night-blooming flowers. The stars are emerging overhead, one by one, then in multitudes, and you are at peace, not because your problems are solved, but because you have accepted your place in the order of things. This is the Roman night. This is the Stoic peace. Let it settle over you now. Seneca was born around 4 BCE in Cordoba, a city in the Roman province of Spain. His father was a famous teacher of rhetoric, and from a young age Seneca showed brilliance with words. He could craft sentences that sparkled. He could make arguments that seemed irrefutable. He came to Rome as a young man. He studied philosophy. He began to make a name for himself in the courts. He seemed destined for greatness, but life had other plans. In the year 41 CE, Seneca was at the height of his career, a senator, a successful lawyer, a man of influence and wealth. Then came the accusation. The emperor Claudius accused Seneca of having an affair with his sister. The charge was almost certainly false, a convenient excuse to remove a man who had made powerful enemies. The punishment was exile. Seneca was stripped of his position, stripped of his wealth, and sent to the island of Corsica, a rocky, mountainous place in the middle of the Mediterranean, far from everything and everyone he loved. Imagine the journey, a ship carrying a disgraced man away from Rome, the city growing smaller and smaller on the horizon, until finally nothing but empty sea. Days of sailing, then the rocky coast of Corsica appearing, wild mountains rising from the water, a place of shepherds and bandits, of loneliness and exile. Seneca was 44 years old, at an age when most men hoped to enjoy the fruits of their labor. He found himself starting over with nothing. For 8 long years, Seneca lived on Corsica. He could have given in to despair. He could have raged against the injustice. He could have spent his days plotting revenge or drowning his sorrows. But he was a Stoic. Instead of despairing, he wrote. He wrote philosophical essays about the shortness of life, about anger and its costs, about the consolations that remain when everything else is taken away. And he wrote something extraordinary. Seneca's mother was named Helvia. She was a woman whose life had been marked by unimaginable loss. Her own mother died giving birth to her. She outlived her husband. She buried her beloved uncle, and she watched 3 of her grandchildren die. Just 20 days after one of those grandchildren, Seneca's own infant son, died in her arms, she received the devastating news that Seneca had been taken away to Corsica. She was broken. What Seneca did next shows us the heart of Stoicism. He waited. He knew that grief must be grieved, that rushing to console someone in fresh anguish can do more harm than good. As he later wrote, "I realized that your grief should not be intruded upon while it was fresh and agonizing, in case the consolations themselves should rouse and inflame it." But when enough time had passed, he wrote to her, not a letter asking for pity, not a letter complaining of his fate. He wrote a letter of consolation to his mother. The very person whose misfortune was being grieved became the consoler of the griever. Seneca told his mother not to worry about him. He was doing his best, he wrote, to crawl forward to bind her wounds while staunching his own cuts with his hand. He assured her that he was happy even in exile, because true happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances. He reminded her of all the resources she still possessed, her intelligence, her other children, her character, her memories of the good she had done. External fortune had taken much from her, but it could not take what mattered most. There is an image that captures this moment perfectly. Picture Seneca on a rocky Corsican hillside, watching ships sail past toward Rome, the city he loved, the life he had lost, all passing by out of reach. Yet he sits writing, not a cry of anguish, but words of comfort for someone else. A man who lost everything, finding the strength to help another. This is Stoicism in practice, not theory, not abstract principles, but a living philosophy that helps us face the worst that life can bring. Seneca wrote, "There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And if you really want to escape the things that harass you, what you need is not to be in a different place, but to be a different person." 8 years later, Seneca was recalled to Rome. He became advisor to the young emperor Nero. He helped guide the empire through its most peaceful period. He became one of the most famous men in the world. But perhaps his truest achievement was that letter to his mother, written from exile, offering comfort when he himself was in need of comfort. As you rest tonight, consider this: even in your darkest moments, you have something to give. Even when you feel you have nothing, you have your attention, your care, your presence. This is what the Stoics teach. We are never so poor that we cannot help another. Seneca's life did not end peacefully. After years as Nero's advisor, guiding the young emperor through the best years of his reign, Seneca found himself caught in the web of Roman politics. Nero had grown paranoid. He saw conspiracies everywhere. He trusted no one. In the year 65 CE, a real conspiracy was discovered, a plot to assassinate the emperor. Many of Nero's closest advisors were implicated or accused of being implicated, whether guilty or not. Seneca was named. The emperor sent soldiers to his villa. They carried orders for Seneca to take his own life. It was a Roman custom. a way of allowing a condemned man to die with dignity rather than facing public execution. When the soldiers arrived, Seneca was with his wife Paulina and a few close friends. He received the news calmly. He asked for his will to make changes. The soldiers refused. So Seneca turned to his friends and said, "Since I am prevented from showing gratitude for your services, I leave you the only thing I have left, but the most precious thing of all, the pattern of my life. If you remember this, you will win the reward of true friendship, a reputation for virtue." His wife Paulina declared that she would die with him. Seneca did not argue. He admired her courage. They opened their veins together, husband and wife, bleeding side by side. But Seneca was old, and his blood flowed slowly. He asked for hemlock, the poison that had killed Socrates 500 years before. But his body was too cold. The poison had no effect. Finally, he was carried into a hot bath. The steam and heat opened his veins, and he passed away. His last words, spoken to his secretary, were a continuation of his philosophical work. Even in death, he was teaching. There is something both terrible and beautiful in this scene. A man who spent his life writing about death, finally facing it. A philosopher who taught acceptance, accepting the ultimate test of his philosophy. We might wonder, did Seneca find peace in those final hours? Did his teachings sustain him? The ancient accounts suggest they did. He did not rage. He did not beg. He used his last moments to comfort others, to leave a legacy of wisdom, to demonstrate that a good man can face anything, even death. Seneca had written years before, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last, by death's final constraint, to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing." And elsewhere, let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. Seneca died at the age of 69, having lived through exile and glory, poverty and wealth, obscurity and fame. He wrote some of the most beautiful philosophical prose in any language. He counseled emperors and consoled the grieving. He showed that philosophy was not just for the classroom, but for the chaos of real life. And when his time came, he faced it as he had taught others to face it, with acceptance, with dignity, with peace. As you rest tonight, you need not think of death as something to fear. The Stoics saw it as natural, as inevitable, as nothing more than the end of a chapter in a story that continues without us. "He who has learned to die," Seneca wrote, "has unlearned slavery. When we accept our mortality, we are free, free from the desperate clinging that makes life anxious, free to focus on what matters, free to live fully because we know that life is precious and brief." But this is heavy wisdom for a sleepy night. Let it settle gently, like leaves falling on still water. You need not understand it all tonight. Simply rest. Of all the Stoic teachers, perhaps none had a more remarkable life than Epictetus. He was born around 50 CE in Hierapolis, a city in what is now Turkey. He was born into slavery. His very name, Epictetus, means acquired or obtained, a name given to him by his master, not by his parents. His real name has been lost to history. We know nothing of his mother or father. Perhaps they too were slaves. Perhaps they were free people sold into bondage. Their story disappeared when Epictetus was taken from them. His master was a man named Epaphroditus, who served as secretary to the Emperor Nero. Epaphroditus was himself a former slave who had risen to power, yet he was cruel to those beneath him. Ancient accounts tell a haunting story. One day, for reasons we do not know, Epaphroditus was twisting Epictetus's leg. Whether in punishment or mere brutality, the master bent the slave's limb further and further. Epictetus said calmly, "You will break my leg." Epaphroditus continued. The bones snapped. Epictetus said simply, "I told you so." Whether this story is exactly true, we cannot know, but it captures something essential about this man. Epictetus was lame for the rest of his life. He walked with a pronounced limp, a constant reminder of what had been done to him. But his mind remained free. Later he would write, "Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will. And say this to yourself with regard to everything that happens." Despite being a slave, Epictetus was allowed to study philosophy. His master sent him to attend lectures by Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected Stoic teachers in Rome. Perhaps Epaphroditus saw value in having an educated slave. Perhaps he recognized Epictetus's intelligence. We do not know his reasons, but Epictetus absorbed every word. He learned that no external condition, not even slavery, could enslave the mind. He learned that true freedom was internal, a matter of judgments and values, not of chains and masters. He was a slave who discovered freedom. Eventually, Epictetus gained his liberty. The exact circumstances remain unclear. Perhaps his master freed him. Perhaps freedom came when Epaphroditus died. We know only that Epictetus became a free man. He began teaching philosophy in Rome, gathering students who came to hear the former slave speak of freedom and virtue. But then the Emperor Domitian, suspicious of philosophers, expelled them all from the city. Some were executed, others fled. Epictetus went into exile in Nicopolis, a small city in Greece, and there he established a school that became famous throughout the empire. He lived simply, almost ascetically. His house had no locks because he owned nothing worth stealing: a mat on the floor, a lamp, a clay cup. These were his possessions. He never married until near the end of his life, when he adopted a child who otherwise had been abandoned, and took in a woman to help raise the boy. Even then he remained poor. The slave with the broken leg, the man who owned nothing, became one of the most influential teachers in history. His words were studied by Marcus Aurelius, by the early Christians, by philosophers and statesmen and ordinary people across 2,000 years. He proved that wisdom is not a matter of circumstances. It does not require wealth or freedom or health or position. It requires only the willingness to examine your own mind and to take responsibility for your own judgments. As you rest tonight, remember Epictetus. Remember that whatever your circumstances, your mind is your own. Your judgments are your own. Your response to life is your own. No one can take that from you. Marcus Aurelius never wanted to be emperor. He dreamed of being a philosopher, of living a simple life of study and contemplation, of spending his days reading and thinking and discussing ideas with friends. Instead, fate placed upon his shoulders the weight of an entire civilization. He was born in 121 CE into a prominent Roman family, but the throne was not his birthright. As a boy, he was studious and serious. He loved philosophy from an early age, wearing a rough Greek cloak instead of soft Roman clothes, sleeping on a hard bed instead of a comfortable one, trying to live as the philosophers lived. The Emperor Hadrian noticed this unusual boy, this child who seemed more interested in virtue than in power. Through a series of adoptions, Marcus was groomed to rule, first as heir to Antoninus Pius, then as emperor himself. He accepted his duty, but he never stopped wishing for a different life. In 1601 CE, Marcus became emperor. For the next 19 years, until his death in 180, he bore the burden of rule, not in the comfort of Rome, but often on the frozen frontiers of the empire. Germanic tribes pressed against the northern borders, plague swept through the provinces, rebellions flared and had to be suppressed. Marcus spent much of his reign living in military camps, commanding legions, making decisions that meant life or death for thousands. And at night, in his tent, by the flickering light of an oil lamp, he wrote. The Meditations, Marcus Aurelius's private journal, was never intended for publication. It was a conversation with himself, a way of processing his thoughts, a discipline to keep his mind focused on what mattered. He wrote in Greek, the language of philosophy, not Latin, the language of command. He did not give the book a title. Later generations called it To Himself, or simply Meditations. It is perhaps the most intimate look into any ancient mind, the private thoughts of the most powerful man in the world. Marcus and his wife Faustina had at least 14 children together. Only 5 would outlive their parents, 4 daughters and 1 son. The others died in infancy or childhood, one after another, their small bodies laid to rest in the mausoleum of Hadrian. Try to imagine this grief, compounded again and again. Marcus wrote in his journal, comparing his children to leaves. Paraphrasing the ancient poet Homer, men come and go as leaves year by year upon the trees. Those of autumn the wind sheds upon the ground, but when the spring returns, the forest buds forth with fresh vines. After losing one of his young children, Marcus was once moved to tears in public. He was hearing a legal case, and the advocate said something, we do not know what, that reminded him of his loss. The philosopher-emperor, who wrote so eloquently about accepting fate, wept in front of his court. Even the Stoics could not always contain their grief. And yet he continued. For nearly 20 years he ruled while battling Germanic tribes along the Danube, while watching friends betray him, while burying his children one by one. He wrote in his journal at night, reminding himself to get out of bed each morning, even when all he wanted was to stay under the blankets. At dawn, he wrote to himself, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I am going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE at the age of 58, probably on campaign, probably from plague. His last recorded words to his officers were, "Go to the rising sun. I am already setting." The philosopher who never wanted power, the emperor who longed for a quiet life of study, the grieving father who buried child after child, he faced his own death with the same calm acceptance he had practiced all his life. What can we learn from Marcus Aurelius? Perhaps this, that philosophy is not for comfortable times only. It is easy to be philosophical when everything is going well. The test comes when everything falls apart. Marcus wrote his meditations not in a peaceful garden, but in a military tent, surrounded by war and death and plague. He practiced acceptance not when life was easy, but when it was hardest. And perhaps this too, that even emperors struggle to get out of bed in the morning, that even the most powerful man in the world needed to remind himself of his purpose. You are not alone in your struggles. You are in the company of emperors. As you rest tonight, consider the image of Marcus Aurelius, an oil lamp flickering in his tent, the sounds of the military camp outside, soldiers talking quietly, horses stamping in the cold, and the emperor, the most powerful man in the world, writing reminders to himself about how to be a good person. This is what philosophy looks like in practice. Not grand gestures, but small disciplines, night after night, word after word. Let your own thoughts settle now, like sediment in still water. Let the clarity come. Let us spend some time with the words of Marcus Aurelius. His Meditations is a book unlike any other, a private journal never meant to be read, the intimate thoughts of the most powerful man in the world, and yet the things he wrote to himself speak to us still. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." These words were written by a man who had watched his children die, who was fighting a war he did not want, who bore responsibilities that would crush most people, and yet he could write, "What a precious privilege it is to be alive." This is not denial. This is perspective. This is the recognition that even in the midst of suffering, there is something miraculous about existence itself. He wrote, "Dwell on the beauty of life. Watch the stars and see yourself running with them. Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." Marcus was not being morbid. He was trying to wake himself up, to shake himself out of the sleepwalk of habit, to see each day as the gift it truly is. The Stoics called this memento mori, remember that you will die. And far from being depressing, they found it liberating. When you remember that your time is limited, you stop wasting it on things that do not matter. You focus on what is truly important. You live more fully because you know that life will not last forever. He wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." This is such simple wisdom, and yet so hard to practice. We spend so much of our lives worrying about tomorrow, about next week, about next year. We rehearse disasters that may never happen. We fear enemies that do not exist. And Marcus, who had real enemies, who faced real disasters, counsels us to let the future alone, to meet it when it comes, with whatever we have at that moment. You will be ready, he tells us. You will have what you need. Trust yourself. He wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Such a simple statement, and yet it contains the entire Stoic philosophy. If your thoughts are fearful, your life will be fearful. If your thoughts are angry, your life will be angry. If your thoughts are peaceful, your life will be peaceful. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can learn to control how we think about what happens. And in that control lies freedom. He wrote, "How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he himself is doing to make it just and holy. How much energy we spend comparing ourselves to others, judging them, worrying about their opinions of us. Marcus reminds us that all of this is wasted. The only person you need to attend to is yourself. The only work that matters is your own character, your own virtue, your own peace. Let the neighbors be. Focus on your own path." He wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart." This is perhaps the most beautiful of all his teachings. We do not choose our circumstances. We do not choose the people in our lives. Fate brings them to us, or us to them. And the Stoic response is not to resist, not to complain, not to wish things were different, but to accept and to love. To love the life you have, not the life you imagine. To love the people you are given, not the people you wish you had. This is not settling for less. This is recognizing what is truly valuable. This is gratitude in its deepest form. As you rest tonight, let these words settle into you. You need not remember them all. You need not analyze them or apply them. Simply let them be, like seeds scattered on soil. They will grow in their own time, in their own way. For now, just rest in the presence of ancient wisdom. The ancient Stoics had a practice they performed every night before closing their eyes. It was a kind of meditation, a review of the day, a settling of accounts with themselves. Seneca described it in his writing. "Every night when the lamp has been taken away and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day. I go back over what I have done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." This practice was not about guilt or self-punishment. It was about awareness, about learning, about preparing the mind for rest. The Stoic would ask himself 3 questions. What have I done today? What did I do well, and what could I have done better? What did I leave undone? What duty did I neglect? What good did I fail to do? And finally, what have I learned? How am I different from the person I was this morning? The purpose was not to lie awake cataloging your failures. The purpose was to create closure, to process the day so that it need not follow you into sleep, to learn whatever lessons the day offered and then release them. As Seneca wrote, "When the light has been taken away and my wife has fallen silent, I scan the whole of my day and go back over what I have done and said. I pass nothing by, I omit nothing, for why should I shrink from any of my mistakes when I may commune thus with myself? See that you never do that again. I will pardon you this time. There is something beautiful in this practice. The philosopher alone with himself, the house quiet, the lamp extinguished, the darkness a kind of friend, and in that darkness a reckoning, not harsh but honest, not punishing but teaching. What did I do today? The question itself brings a kind of peace, because in asking it, you acknowledge that the day is over. There is nothing more to be done. The actions are complete. Only the reflection remains. You might try a gentler version of this practice tonight. Not a harsh examination, but a soft review. What happened today? Let the events drift past like clouds, not judging them, not fixing them, just noticing. What did you do well? Perhaps something small, a kindness, a moment of patience, a task completed. Let yourself notice it. What would you do differently? Not with regret, but with learning. The Stoics believed that every mistake was a teacher, every stumble an opportunity to grow. And then let it go. The day is over. You cannot change what happened. You can only rest and begin again tomorrow. Seneca found that this practice helped him sleep peacefully. By examining the day, he emptied his mind of its concerns. By acknowledging his mistakes, he freed himself from ruminating on them. By noting his successes, he reminded himself that he was capable of goodness. And then sleep came easily. What could be better than this habit, he wrote, of reviewing the entire day? How soundly I sleep after my self-examination. How calm and deep and free. Tonight you have done this work already, simply by listening. You have journeyed through 2,000 years of wisdom. You have met philosophers who faced exile and slavery and the death of children and found peace. You have heard the great teaching that some things are within our control and some things are not, and that freedom comes from knowing the difference. You have rested in the Painted Porch, walked the dark streets of Athens with Cleanthes, watched Seneca write from exile, stood beside Marcus Aurelius in his tent. This is your evening practice for tonight. Let it settle into you now, like water seeping into dry earth. The wisdom is planted. You need do nothing more. Our journey is nearly complete. From the shipwreck that launched a philosophy to the tent where an emperor wrote by lamplight, we have traveled far. But the Stoics would remind us the journey was never really outward. It was always inward, to that quiet place within yourself where peace already waits. Let us gather the wisdom we have found. From Zeno we learned that disaster can be transformation, that what we lose may free us for something greater, that the worst day of our lives can become the first day of our true lives. From Cleanthes we learned that wisdom is for everyone, that honest labor and philosophical contemplation can walk hand in hand, that dedication matters more than talent. From Seneca we learned that even in exile, even when everything is taken from us, we can still give comfort to others. We are never so poor that we cannot help. From Epictetus we learned that true freedom is internal, that no chain can bind the mind, that a slave can be freer than an emperor if he masters his own judgments. From Marcus Aurelius, we learned that philosophy is tested in difficulty, not in comfort, that even emperors struggle to get out of bed, and that small disciplines, practiced night after night, can sustain us through anything. And from all of them we learned the great teaching. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Within our control, our opinions, our choices, our responses. Outside our control, everything else. This is not resignation, it is liberation. When we stop fighting against what we cannot change, when we stop worrying about what is not in our power, when we focus only on our own thoughts and actions, peace comes. Not the peace of giving up, but the peace of clarity, the peace of knowing what matters and what does not. The Stoics understood something profound about sleep. They saw it as practice, a small death each night, a letting go of the day, a release of all concerns, and then resurrection each morning, a new day, a fresh start, another chance to practice virtue. You are performing this sacred practice now. You are letting go of the day, releasing your concerns, returning to the simplicity of breath and rest. This is what the philosophers did 2,000 years ago, and what their students do still. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Tonight there is no future to worry about. There is only this moment, this breath, this rest. Tomorrow will come when it comes. You will meet it with whatever you have, but that is tomorrow's concern. Tonight there is only peace." Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have. You have enough. You have breath. You have rest. You have this moment of stillness. This is enough." Epictetus wrote, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. Tonight is happening exactly as it should. You are resting. The world is continuing without your effort. The stars are turning overhead as they have turned for billions of years, and you are part of it all, a thread in the vast tapestry, a wave in the endless ocean, a note in the cosmic music. Rest now as part of everything." The lamp is dimming. The voice grows quiet. The philosophers have said their piece, and now they too fall silent. What remains is the wisdom they planted. It will grow in its own time, in its own way. You need do nothing. Sleep now, as Zeno slept after his shipwreck, as Cleanthes slept after carrying water through the dark streets, as Seneca slept in his exile on Corsica, as Epictetus slept in his simple house with no locks, as Marcus Aurelius slept in his tent on the frontier. They found peace, and so can you. The door to the inner retreat is open. Walk through and rest.